Okay, so let's do here. Okay, so in the last class, we did discuss about that how exactly when you write the program, how does it go to the operating system? So you open your code editor, which in your case is Eclipse. You write your source code, and in the source code is stored in the format of .java format. You give it to the compiler to run your program using that arrow button, and then based on that, a bytecode is created. And let me open that so that you know what I am talking about. So it was under C users, and this is my workspace. So if you remember in the last class, we did had this September 16 project that we created. That is the project under your Eclipse workspace. And inside this, there are two folders. SRC folder contains the .java format, and when you compile your code, which in your cases, for instance, when I launch this, it should store your this compiled version into .byte format. So there were a couple of programs that we wrote in the last class, and if you see besides the SRC folder, there is also a bin folder. Inside this, there's this bytecode stored in the form of .class format as soon as you run your program. And then this bytecode is given to your operating system, which executes whatever is written in your program. So that's what we understood in the last class. We also discussed about certain applications that you can create. This specific command prompt version, you do not use a GUI to write the code. You just used a notepad and then you compile your code using the command prompt. You will go under on your Windows machine, you will type down CMD. This will open a um, a window where you will compile your code, which in this case was using this Java C compiler, this Java C compiler, then followed by the name of the file and then .java format. So once you compile, if there is no error, you will get something like this, which will go to the next line and where you will run your code. And which in this case would be, you would be using just simple command Java followed by the file, which is that .java format and which will be executed, which in our case, when we are using a GUI, we need not have to go to command prompt and do all of this. Once again, this is altogether, it depends upon your preference, but as modern computers are preferring more of GUI based application, that is the reason we are using Eclipse to do it rather than writing the code like Java C and then followed by the file, which is test.java, and then it will compile the code and then you will run the code. But once again, this is very, you have to write the code for it. And that is the reason we are not going in that specific route. But that is one additional way that you can compile your code. For instance, these are the two commands, as I mentioned, Java C and Java to run the Java application that you have created. There are many popular GUIs, which is also termed as IDE, the development environment, where you can write the codes, and these are NetBeans, Eclipse, IntelliJ, IDEA, Android Studio, and we are particularly using Eclipse. There are these IDEs provide a code or editor format where you can write your code, you can compile your code, and it will also find some errors while you are writing the code. You can also have breakpoints where you can see if there is a logical error in your code. And we will understand all of this as we will be running through most of our codes. But NetBeans also have very similar IDE or GUI format related to Eclipse. If you see, there is also a project explorer, then you write the code over here. There is navigator. If you have different, there is a main program And inside also the main function, there is also another function that you have written, but this is .java, which has multiple function, which is main and some other function. So all of this can be written in your NetBeans as well. Very similar format where you can, once you save the project, you can always open up the project as well. For instance, your friend had written some Java program. He or she can share the Java format, Java program with you, which you can open. So in our Eclipse, what we can do is under File, there is an option called Open Project from File System and Open File. And here you can specify that specific file that you want to open, which has the Java code inside it. This happens very similar to NetBeans as well. And all of this is given for NetBeans, which we are not interested. And this is in your chapter 1 also. That is the reason I have included all of this in your slides. But this is for your Eclipse version where you can click next, and that's what we understood. And finally, we get something like this. And that's what we were working so far. This is Eclipse with a Java project where this future value app.java is an application that you have written, and then you compile using this green arrow. And that will give you any error in the below window, which is over here, which shows the problems, Java documentation, declaration, and console. Console is the output where the output would be seen, which in this case is, so if you see over here, currently it is compiling the version which is not test, but I believe it is movie, this one it is compiling, and that is the reason I'm getting this one. If you see over here, movie code info is the file which it is compiling. If I have to compile test file, I will double click it and I will rerun the program, and this time I see the response which is given over here. When you submit your code, sometimes when LLM had not come, large language model, we used to just go to file and click on save as, and that file format you can just submit, and the person would be just able to open that particular Java formatted file and then run the file. But as I mentioned in the last class, I am interested just to see the screenshot as the screenshot with the output. So once you have written your code, you are supposed to click on print screen or use snipping tool for capturing your screen, and then storing that output format in the Word file, and that is the Word file you would be submitting. So I'll go back over here. This is all these steps are illustrated over here so that if you are facing any issue, you can just follow through this screenshots which are included in the slide deck. You can import project from the file system. As I mentioned, sometimes when you are collaborating with multiple students or multiple people are working on the same project, you store one format and you share it with the other people. And though other people will just import the projects into their file directory. So for instance, I have written a specific version, which is version 1. So I'll open my white space. So for instance, if we are creating a GUI for advanced calculator. And for this, let's go back. So what I will be able to do is I will create in my computer, for instance, my program called my class called cal.java, and I will store it and I will share it with you. You will take that specific file, you will open your Eclipse again, and under Eclipse, there is an option to even open or import, where you can run this specific file, which I have created on my system, on your system. So here, if you see over here, file, there is an open projects from file system. where you can import the source. Export is just taking from your Eclipse version to your local directory, and import is taking from your local directory to the Eclipse. And you will specify over here your directory. And that directory would be the directory which the other person has stored on their system. And you can open it and you can just run it. So it's a very simple process to even collaborate and share files between different people if you are working in a project. So as I mentioned, if you want to delete the project, what you can do is on your, this is the, for instance, I want to delete this. So I will right click this and I will click on delete. As soon as I will click delete, it will ask, I will click OK and it gets deleted. If I want to create a new file, I'll just right click and click on new. And then, so right click on this default package, and under new, I will create a new class. And this class would be the new class that I want to create, maybe short. That is the name. That should include public static void main. I will finish it and it will store it under your workspace, which is September 16th program. So if I want to create a new one, so I will click on new. And here in this case, I will create Java project. So today is September 18th. And I can create September 18th program. So remember this, a Java project, a single Java project can have multiple Java classes. And which means that in my single workspace, I can have multiple other programs that I can write. So here in this case, I will delete, add project to working sets, and click on next, click on finish. So if you see over here, now I see September 18 program. This is one directory, this is another directory. So here under this, I have this JRE system library and I have the source folder. Source folder has the .java format. I can actually go back in my directory and I can see now that under my Windows file directory, I do have September 18th program, which has the source folder contains the .java format and bin contains the .class format. As soon as you create your Java class, a .class format is also created and it gets updated as soon as you compile your code. So over here, I can rename this. Once again, I can go refactor and click on rename and click maybe create a class called test. And here I will delete this and I can write my same program, which is this program from another file and store it over here. I can delete this, I can cancel this, and run this program. So if you see over here, I have two different directories, September 16th program and September 18th, and I have the same class name, which is test in both of them. So if you understand this thing, that there is a single folder which is termed as Java project, which is the Java project, which can contain multiple classes. So yeah, here when I created a folder which had the test class, the in my system, it is stored under September 16th. I can have the same program, the same name or different classes. So test is a class since it's stored in .java format. And I can have it in different directory. So this one also contain movie and movie or something, and this can contain something else, some other class. So anything, the project directory will contain multiple classes, and you can have multiple classes in the same directory. And if you want to create a new class, as I mentioned, always remember, you will select whatever is that package or SRC folder, right clicks, click on new, and then click on new class. A new class would be created. So I can name over here as long class. This is the new class that I'm creating. So here, public class long is already now there. And inside this, I can write main function. Is it making sense? Does everyone understand what's going on? Any questions? No questions? Okay, so no question, then I'll move just forward. Okay, here, similarly, all of this is, all these screenshots are included so that you are aware if you want to write your program, how to do it. As I mentioned, this is the dialog box for creating a new project. You can create a single project and you can create multiple classes in it. So all of these steps are given over here. So if you have no questions, now we will go into another topic, which are termed as the data types. And these data types are the variables or some, I would say, some kind of data that can be stored in Java. Data could be in the form of numbers, it could be in the form of alphabets, it could be in the form of some other way, which could be file as well. But currently, we will be just looking at data types which are in the form of numbers or Boolean values or other things. So, as I mentioned, a program can be considered as a collection of instructions which are written in a specific or logical order to perform a specific task. And these can be executed in computers. It can also be executed in a machine, and machine could be a robotic machine where a robot is asked to do some certain program, certain task, and you can write a set of instructions in some order so that the robot can perform that specific task. For instance, you are creating your own machine, which in this case is a lifting arm, a robotic arm. Have you guys seen a robotic arm? How exactly that works? If not, I can show that. So here, you see robotic arm. This is a kind of, and you can always buy these these test kits where you can program it to do some specific task. I don't know why it's not opening. Let me just open maybe this one. Um, so here, this particular machine, you can train it using the program which we are learning, and that can do a specific task. So here, the task could be just lifting a cup of coffee, or lifting a glass of water, or like cup has a different structure as well as glass has a different structure. A coffee would be always, you will be holding your first finger versus for holding a cup, versus if you're holding a glass, you would be having your a separate glass. So what I'm trying to say is you can include certain programs that can be written for training these robotic arms as well using Java once again. So all these instructions are the instructions are given in a specific order, which in the case of robotic arm would be lifting your robot, going to the cup, and then taking the coffee, or and then bringing it near to the master programmer. So these instructions generally always have a set of input and a process that needs to be executed and an output. So in our case, when we were writing a program which was written in the main function, always needs to end with a semicolon. And that's what we did see over here. When we wrote our test program, once this is step number one, print this, and then a semicolon. Then step number two, print this, and then a semicolon. So all have been written in a logical order, and we include a semicolon. When right now we were just doing the printing of task, but let's suppose that we want to do some additional task of adding, like some kind of mathematical operation, then in that case we have to use the concept of variables, which variables refer to the data. We call it variable because um, as the name suggests, it changes the value every time. And that is the reason we call it as variable. There is also constant data type where the value would remain same. So for instance, I want to create a variable which will always change the value. So for instance, I create a variable uh, A, and I can name a variable of any name I can give. I can say it as lowercase a. I can say it as capital A. I can create a variable with my name as well. So I can create a variable with your name, like anything which you can imagine. So this is the variable name, and this value could be changed. So as soon as you create a variable, a separate space is allocated in your memory where we will have the value of variable, which is a stored. And you can assign certain values. So let's suppose I say lowercase a is equal to 10. So in our memory, a small space would be stored, and that space would contain this value, which is 10. Now let's suppose I want to change this value. So I in our program, what I can do is a equals to 10 and then followed by semicolon. And then I will say a equals to 20 and then semicolon. So I can write this program quickly so that you can see in my test program over here, I create a variable. Every time you create a variable, you have to assign what kind of values these variables will store, and we will understand what are the different types of variables. So for instance, I want to create a variable which will change its value, and it will only and only contain integer values. Does everyone know what is an integer? Whole number, yes. Any number which is in the form of whole numbers, and which we can, and a whole number is any number which is greater than a zero value, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But the beauty of an integer value is that integer can contain both positive number and a negative number in this case. So what I will do is, for instance, I will create an integer variable. So there is a specific keyword used for creating integer variables, which is int. Every time you cannot write integer, that will give an error. You can write int. Int is the keyword. The term keyword is that this int is created as a keyword so that everyone knows that int is considered as integer. So for instance, I can my name is Hina. I Somebody cannot change my name Hina to Tom, because Hina is the identifier for me, which is used over here. So in this case, integer is that keyword which is utilized for storing a variable value which can contain any value. So for instance, I say int a equals to 10, then followed by semicolon. So what I'm saying is, what I created is an integer value which is a, and which contains value which is 10. Now let's suppose I say a equals to 20, followed by semicolon. So I'm not creating another int. I'm not saying int a equals to 10 because I have already created. I can, in my new line, I'm just replacing the value of a to 20. Now, if I want to print this value, what I can do is I can say system.out.print followed by a. In this case, when you are just printing the value which is stored in this variable, we do not include it in these brackets. Anything, if, for instance, if I include in brackets, it would be printed as is. If I do not, so let me just give you this example: system.out.print, and this time I give a. So if you will understand this, so the first one, will just print. Okay, let me just ask you, what do you think the output in this, what is your intuition saying? What would be the output in this case when I'll compile this?
I think it'll say A20.
A20, yes. Would it be in the same line or different line?
The same line.
Same line. Because there is no println. And it would be, would there be a space between A20 or it would be A20?
No, there wouldn't be a space.
Yeah. So if I'll compile this code and I'll run this, it says A20. So if you see over here, and I can always include \n to include a new line. And if I do not want to use println. So here in this case, if you see, when I have included A in the quotes, it is giving me it is printing A as is. When I'm excluding the quote, it is giving me the value which is stored in this variable, which is A, which is 20 in this case. So what happened in this code is, initially when you created int A is equal to 10, you are telling to the compiler that, okay, I want to create a variable whose name is A, and I want to store the value of 10 in this variable, which is A. Now, when in the second line, when I say A equals to 20, what it does, it replaces the value of 10 to 20. And now if I say print me the value of A, it will print me 20. So here the variable name is integer, and as people mentioned, it's a value, and generally this value is between the range which is minus 2 to the power of 31 so I will include this power to positive 2 raised to the power of 31. So you understand this 2 to the power of 31. Everyone, do you understand 2 to the power of 31 when I say what exactly does that mean? If I say 2 to the power of 2, what exactly that means?
4.
Yeah. If I say 2 to the power of 4,
16.
yes. So if I say 2 to the power of 31, which means some value which would be in the range of, I believe, 655 something, it is there. So 2 to the power of 31 is the range of, or the values which it can store. So integer value, I cannot have any values which is greater than 2 to the power of 31. So for instance, if I say, let me give you an example over here. So let's suppose I have this value, which is a very large value. It has started giving me an error. And the error says that it is out of range. See over here, at some place, it will not give me an error. That is defined as the range. So the maximum value that it can take is 2 to the power of 31, which is that many values. I cannot have a number greater than that. Or similarly, on our number line, there is also negative values. So it can take both positive values, which is 2 to the power of 31, and negative values, which is 2 to the power of 31, negative 2 to the power of 31. If you assign any value which is greater than that, then in that case, it will be out of range and it will not be able to process that value. So there is the reason these keywords are assigned so that people know that it is just an integer value which can take any values, which can change the value between these specific range. If I have a bigger number, I can use another for data type, which is long. And long, so I'll write this over here. So int this, and let's suppose if I say int b, and in this case, I can have a bigger value, sorry, not int. This time I'm saying it as long. Long is another keyword which can take some values which is greater than these values. So why giving me another? Let's see. Is out of range? Okay. Okay. So this time also long can take a value, as far as I remember, is minus 2 to the power of 63 to positive 2 to the power of 63. So any values, 63 or 64, I believe. It can take signed complements, and we are not going towards this, but there are some values that is out of range. You can always have a different data type associated with it, and you can have same values assigned to the different variables. Here in this case, when you created another data type, in this case, you are asking the compiler to create another space for B, which will contain some specific value. I can always change these values with time, and there are specific keywords utilized for different data types, as I mentioned. So I'll go back over here. So in this program, when you write a specific Java program, you can include package details. So package is some inbuilt libraries that you can use so that you can process certain information. So java.input output is a kind of library to process any kind of input and output handling. I'm creating the class, which is termed as sum in this case, and now I assign a data member. The data member is the integer values that I can create. One thing that I would like to remind you is sometimes people do include something like this: int, let's say x, y, and z. This is one specific way where you can have multiple variables in the same line, or you can have int x. This right now, it is giving me an error because x is already defined, and you can see the error over here. It will say something like that: duplicate local variable x. Let me change this to capital X. This time it gives an removes the error because it is case sensitive. It will create a lowercase x and a capital letter X. But let's suppose here in this case, let me make it as a variable Tom. And then I can have another variable, which is Jerry. And these are integer values. So either in the same line, I can assign the value to the variable, or I can first assign or create the variable and then assign the value. So I can always do something like this. First, I create the variable Tom, and then I assign the value, which is 10, to the variable, which is Tom in this case. Or I can either do Tom2, and this time I can assign the value, which is, for instance, 100. And you can assign any value. It's not, I'm just picking 10, 10, 10 so that you understand. But if you understand, you can first, so this is declaring a variable. So you are declaring a variable which is of int type. And this is assigning a value to the integer, which is to the integer Tom. And you can do both declaration and assignment in the same line as well. So there are different ways that you can write the program. It all depends on your preference, whether you want to first declare a variable and then assign the value, or just do declaring and assignment at the same time. So here in this specific program, you can see what you are doing over here is you are creating data members, which in this case is int ABC. This is a concept of function which we will understand in like later classes. But so far, what we understood was this 4 variables, not variables. These, when you wrote a function, which is the main function, you use these keywords, which is public, static, void, main. And I'll tell you what exactly each of these values actually mean. So public, so this is always, public is a keyword, static is a keyword, void is a keyword, and main is also a keyword which is used, and it is fixed. you cannot just ignore and not include in your class. It is mandatory to have the main function. It is always mandatory. If I do not have that, it will give me, it will just, so here, let's see over here. So if I remove this, and if I remove this line as well. So if you see, I just created public class. What is the error over here? Some error is coming over here. So if you see over here, I cannot compile the code. So every class, it's not mandatory to include the main function in every class, but if you want the operating system to execute your program, you need to have public static void main. It is always very mandatory, and every time it is encapsulated in the curly bracket. So anything which is written inside the main function would be executed first, anything which is written, and it will do in line by line manner. So when I say public, public is a keyword to make it publicly available to all the users on your system. Or when you make it private, private is another access specifier. If you want to make a class only like limited to private users. So public and private are the two keywords which are utilized to specify the accessibility of that specific class. For main class, it is always important to make it as a public function. If you do not include and if you change it to private, you will get an you cannot write private static void main. Sometimes people do that, but for in our class, we will be just understanding that every time we will be including this access specifier as publicly, which means that it should be publicly available. The second keyword which is generally used is the static keyword, and this is for instantiating the class. So what is instantiating? So instantiating is a concept in any programming language to so every time a class is created. So remember the concept of class. When we create a class is a kind of a house where you can have the main entry, and in the main entry you provide what would be the set of functions that you are doing. Every time this class needs to be executed, it needs to have an object, and we will understand all these concepts in later classes, but I'm telling you why these keywords are always important to include in your class. So static means that this function do not require an object to be instantiated in order to run this specific class. So as I mentioned, in your Java project, you can have multiple classes. So one, we created a test class, and I can have some other class. Let's suppose hello class. I can have main function over here. I can have main function also over here. But let's suppose I created another class which is by class, and I do not include a main function inside this by class. So in that case, I would need an object to start this class. And we will once again understand this concept of objects in the later classes. For instance, if I do not have the main function, then in order for me to run this specific class, I would need an object. So that is the reason when you include a main function in a class, you are telling to the compiler, since I'm including the main function, I do not need an object. And that is the reason you include this keyword, which is termed as our static keyword. So static. And finally, the next word is void. Void is used to tell to the compiler that once it has executed, what would be the return value, which is, okay, you have set of function that you want to execute. Do you want this function to return some value, which could be integer value, long value, string value, but generally, when you are writing main function, the return value is specified as void. You are saying to the compiler that once it has executed everything, it will not return anything. Nothing would be returned. It's like a bunch of tasks which are done in your main function, And once that has been executed, all the tasks instructions, it will not return any value back to the main function. Once again, we will understand this concept later, but this void is used to tell to the compiler nothing would be returned. Finally, in the main function, we include string args. So if you saw, I use this thing specifically for a reason so that you understand that this square brackets can be interchangeably used. So I will copy this and I will include this. So either you can write string args like this, or you can have first square brackets over here and then the square brackets after args. It is and both of the times it will run the code perfectly fine. Once again, this square brackets can be either included just after string or after args. Do not make it as strings. Once again, it will give an error because string is a keyword which is used by Java. So these values are specifically fixed. You cannot modify any of these values. You can modify these values. You can change the name interchangeably, but you cannot change the values of these keywords, which are predefined. Once again, you might be wondering, can I include something like this? Int string. You can do it, but once again, it is not a good practice to use the keywords as the value. You cannot use the names as keywords to be assigned to some other value. So there are some keywords which have been reserved for doing certain tasks. So it's always a good practice not to use these keywords. So here in this case, every time when you are writing public static void main, remember that these are specific keywords which would be used. Here string is a class and here you are passing an array of arguments. Once again, we will understand what exactly is string, what exactly is arguments, what are arrays in the later classes. But right now, just remember that these are specific keywords which are utilized whenever you write the program. And then you have some block of statements that you include in your function. So you have understood these basic things that you would be writing for writing a Java program. So as I mentioned, there are three kinds of statements that you can include: sequential, iterative, and conditional. So sequential are step by step. So for your first assignment that you would be doing, it would be a sequential set of statement. But in later classes, we will understand that sequential statements sometimes become too hard, or not too hard. It becomes like um, like a specific set of instructions, you have to repeat it. And in that case, it becomes quite cumbersome to write the statements again and again. And that is the reason we use iterative statements. So here, iterative is defined over here. So this while is an iterative function which will execute a set of operation continuously. Similarly, do while is another kind of iterative operation where you tell to the compiler to do some set of operations continuously. There is a condition null statements that we will write which will use the keywords of if and else. If and else are those specific keywords which are used for providing a condition. So if this condition is true, then do that kind of operation, else do this kind of an operation. These are the basic set of instructions which are used by a Java programmer to write different functionality of different code. Iterative functions are also of various types: for, while, do while, and we will understand each one of them when we will be writing our major like advanced program. But right now you should understand that iterative would just repeat, and you can use some kind of methodology to repeat the function, while, do while are some way. Similarly, for condition, you will use the conditional keywords, which is if and else, for doing some kind of conditional task. If there is umbrella, do this specific task. If there is no umbrella, don't do this specific task. So we did cover that how exactly the Java program is built. But you take your Java file that gets converted into dot class, which is given to a Java virtual machine, which will convert that byte code, which is in the form of dot class, in a machine code, which the machine would execute. That is the basic functionality of your Java program. So as in my previous class, I also mentioned that when you are creating a Java program, the beauty of Java project is that if you compile your code in any of your machine, let's suppose I compiled my machine on Windows, I can run that compiled version to any other operating system, which could be Mac OS or your Apple machine, like any Chromebook, anything. What it says is that it is independent of the operating system once it is compiled. So any kind of Java program, once it has been compiled, so your program, which is stored in the form of hello world app.java, would be given to the compiler. The compiler will create what format? Can anyone tell me? What format would be created once you compile?
Dot class.
Yeah, dot class, which is in the form of bytecode. And that bytecode you can run in any of the other operating system. So Java Virtual Machine is that kind of machine interface which would be given, which is available, which has the capability to run the dot class format, the byte format in any other operating system, which was not present in C. Because once you compile the code, if you have compiled a code in Windows machine, you cannot run it in your like Mac OS machine, because it is dependent on the platform that you are compiling your code. So as I mentioned, variable is a kind of a bucket. You can consider it as a bucket, and you store data inside it. You can assign the values always with equal to sign, where you can always also do it Tom equals to 500 here. Do not use double equal to. Double equal to is used if you are checking the condition. When we would be writing if else function, then you will be doing. Always when you are assigning a value with a variable, you will include equals to. Equal to is important to tell to the compiler that I am assigning this specific value to this variable that I have created. Always remember that. Do not change any of the, do not make it as double equal to another thing. It has specific data type. The data type are of various types: integer, long, Boolean, and many others. Like I believe there are 8 different kinds of specific data types that you can create. And in order to use a variable, as I mentioned, you first declare it and then you initialize the value. There is also constant variables. As I mentioned, constant variable value remains always the same. You cannot change. So for instance, if I created constant variable, I can use there is a specific keyword to use it, but that would the value would remain same throughout the execution. I believe it is cons, because I haven't used it since a long time, but I think it is constant or cons something, or I am totally create a local variable constant. So I don't know. There is a specific keyword which is used for creating the constant variables whose value will not change. Right now, we are just understanding variables, and for specifically right now, we will be understanding integer values. When you are creating the name, be descriptive, because sometimes when you are creating your like high programs, you can create variables like add int or add integer equals to just assign. This I can create another value which is subtract integer. Make it descriptive so that people who will be reading your code know what exactly this integer is doing. People have a tendency to make it just like int A, B, C, D, it is completely fine. But if you are writing major programs, it's always be descriptive to have the name associated with what exactly this integer is storing, what exactly it would be doing. And that is the reason be descriptive whenever you are creating the name of the variables. And the name could be anything. Camel casing is adopted. The reason we do camel casing, as I mentioned, is that if you are doing it, then people can differentiate that these are two different names. If I do not include a camel case, it's completely fine. Once again, not to include camel case, but it is important so that anyone who is assessing your code should be able to understand that this is two different words which are used to create a single name, and that is the reason it is preferred to include a casing, a camel casing. It's preferred. It's not mandatory, but it is preferred. As a Java programmer, once you will be applying to different industries, they would always prefer like a camel case if you are using. It is case sensitive, as I mentioned, lowercase a versus capital A would be stored as two different variables. It will not be the same variable. So I can have multiple variables. I can have int. Int is lowercase. Remember that int. You cannot do it as int. It's not right. If I say it gives me an error. If you see over here, it's always integer is always written in lowercase. So I will say it as int. Int Hina versus int capital Hina would be two different variables. But once again, it's not good practice to have the same name with different cases. It's always just keep it like unique names for your variables, whatever you are doing. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are various data types. The data types could be in the form of integer values, could be in the form of string values, which it could be in the form of Boolean values. So integer values, as we discussed, is in the form of numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And string is in the form of alphabets that you create, string values. So let's suppose you want to process two strings values. So one string contains hello and another string contains how are you. So you can write a function so that it will add both hello and how are you together. And in the end, in your output, you can see hello, how are you. So string will always process anything which is in the form of a string, which is written in the form of some words. Boolean will always take the value in the form of 0 or 1, always. Integer will always take integer values, which I mentioned, 2 to the power of 31 to negative 2 to the power of 31. And it is generally the data types are referred as primitive data type. And there are also non-primitive data types, but in this class, we are focusing only on primitive data types. Classes would be discussed. The concept of classes would be discussed in the later classes. But right now, understand that there are many different kind of primitive data types: integer, double, character, Boolean, and string. Character will take a single character. String will contain multiple words. So for instance, if I create string, I can create string A equals to, and I can have hello. That's the string. So it is containing, A is now containing a word which is hello. If I say char B, it will take a single character, which is just a single character, which is C in this case. So I will get rid of all of this and let's do string. The difference between string and the other variables is that string is always written in an S is capital. Always remember that. So if I say string A equals to, I can include anything inside it. Hello. How are you? And now if I'll print, can anyone tell me what would be the output in this case? If I run this.
It'll say, hello, how are you? Just that.
Yeah, so if I'll run this, it prints, hello, how are you? So here it is a string value, string. So if I include quotes in it, what do you think? What would be the output now?
It'll just be A.
Yeah, it will be A, even though A value contains a string value. So remember that string is a specific class or a data type with S being capital. String, when you create. When you create an integer, it will be all in lowercase. Integer b is equals to 10. But when you are creating a string value, if I do not include it in the quotes, it will give me an error because it's a string value, which should contain set of words inside it. And these words are included in quotes. Always remember that. String is a kind of a keyword which is used to store alphabets, words, and other kind of thing, and it should be always written in quotes. There is also another um, primitive data type, which is character, and character will only take a single alphabet. I think it's in double quotes, but let's verify. So let's see H. So here, character is always defined in a single quote. String is defined in double quotes. So if I change, and it will contain only a single character, I can say it as K, Z, anything. And if I print C in this case, what would be the output in this case? System.out.print C.
It'll just print Z.
Yeah, so let's see. Here it prints Z. What about if I include it in double quotes? It gives me an error because it's a character value, because it cannot convert from string to character. So always remember, character is stored in single quotes and it will contain a single value. String will contain set of words which are included in quotes, always in quotes. Integer, you will not include integer in quotes. No, it's not because it's not a character or word. It is a value which is in the form of number. And you can print this by just giving specific characters and specific values. So this is another set of character. Double is another one, and I'll tell you, double has a specific range as well. Double, let me remember. I think it had the double range. Let me just verify. I don't want to give wrong information. Double contains all negative and decimal like point values. So I can create something like this, where double number equals to, and I can write 47.6. Always remember to include a semicolon. 47.6. I can also have 47.0. I can also have 47. It is completely fine. But double will always include your precision value, which in the case of a floating point number. So I can have 47.8. And in this case, when I create integer and I say 10.8, it will give me an error because it will only and only contain numbers, whole numbers. But double can contain the decimal points, and these are given in any format. You can say 47.889 or anything like this. Default value of any value is 0.0. One more thing that I wanted to discuss is, what do you think when I print the value of B? What do you think? It's giving me an error right now. it has not been initialized. But sometimes I believe in earlier compiler, the default value is always 0, always. So even if you do not assign the value, it will print the value as 0. The default value of double is 0.0, where you can change the value to any decimal point. There is also float data type. Float is another kind of primitive data type where you can include float number 1, and this will consider all 32-bit floating point number. This is a 64-bit. Double is a bigger one. So this will take 64-bit of floating point numbers, floating point numbers, and float number, which I have to name it as different, 45.4F. And this will contain 32-bit. 32-bit floating point number. All these are different data types. We are understanding what are the different kinds of data types which are used. Floating point are a slower decimal value I would say floating point numbers which can process 32-bit number. Double is a larger range which contains 64-bit floating point number. Whenever you are creating a float integer value, not float integer, float value, then it would be the number followed by an F. Always. And that is the reason I'm getting an error. If I do not include an F, it will give me an error. So there are certain things that you have to remember. When you are creating string, S should be capital, as I mentioned. S should be capital when you are creating. For any other integer values, whether it is int, double, character, these can be written in lowercase. String is the only one which is written in capital case. And we will understand in the later classes why string is in capital case. If you see public static void main, here also string, S is capital. So string is by default written in a way that S would be capital, always, always. And it's a class, and all other keywords, which is char, int, double, float. I believe double is also a class, I think, if I remember it correctly. Yeah, it will not give me an error because double is also a class. But just to make it consistent, just remember string would always be in capital case, S would be in capital case, and all other different data types can be in lower integer value. So if I say int, I can always say integer, the entire variable as integer value, but this becomes a class. Once again, we will understand this concept of classes in later classes. I do not want to confuse right now. So just make sure that whenever you're creating a variable, which is in the form of integer, make it as an int value. Any questions so far? I have been talking a lot, but any questions?
Sorry, my voice might be a little acting up, but for a little bit of the always have to be like for the double always has to be like a 0.0, or doesn't matter with the number?
It can have any number. I'm just saying the default value is always 0.0, but you can have it any number, any number.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, like, if some would actually like need to be stayed the same, or like double and float, you can add. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so float will always it will process a 32-bit floating point number. You understand the difference between 32 and a 64-bit bit by bit values, like 32 bits would be processed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, all these 32-bit versus for a double, it can process 64-bit. This is 2 to the power of 0, 2 to the power of 1, 2 to the power of 2, 3, 4, 5. And it can process, double can process like 2 to the power of 64 floating point numbers. And this can process 32-bit of floating point number. The only difference is when you write them, floating number, you will always include an F in the end. For double, you are not supposed to include F. You can always include it, but it will just tell to the compiler that double is a kind of a floating point number. And that is the reason you include like F in the end. But it's not mandatory to include F when you are using a double variable. It's just that it will process 64-bit of floating point number. Any question? Okay, if no questions, I will ask question now. So you have to tell me what do you think about what would be the output in this case. So let's see. Let me write it in here. So this is a class with public static void name string args. Include this, and let's see. Char letter 1 equals to 9, and then char letter 2 equals to 65, and then system dot out dot println. System S is always capital, remember that. Letter 1, system dot out dot println as letter 2. And I want you to write this particular program on your machine and tell me what is the output that you are getting, and do you even understand why you are getting this character output. So I want you to create a new class, name it as whatever name you want to, and you have to tell me what is the output. Right now you can predict and then you can check. You can check what is your prediction currently for letter 1 and letter 2, and tell me once you print, is your prediction the same? Tell me the time and just take attendance. But everyone, please write the code and tell me what is the output you are getting. Any prediction for what would be the output?
I think it'll just print 9 and not 65.
Uh, you're partially right.
Oh.
Anyone else? Any guesses?
Wild guess, but is it possible for basically with the whole public class going on that the system can actually add a new number that's not 9 and 65?
Well, yes, for 65, it can pick some value, which could be a character. Yes. It was Lillian? Lillian, did you say or?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, that was me.
Everyone, please write and tell me what you are getting and why do you think that's what you are getting?
I got 9, and then under that I got a capital A.
Yeah. So any
Um,
guess by A?
is it because A is the default value
Mhm.
of the character?
No. You are partially right, but not completely. But I want each one of you to finish. And Dominia, please think more. Why do you think? I am giving you a hint called ASCII. ASCII table or ASCII.
Oh, okay. So the ASCII decimal code for 65 is capital A.
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why did you get that. 16. Okay. I want to make sure that I put all the names. Did everyone finish it? Is everyone getting the output? Okay. Take your time. I will wait. Aaron, Alexander, are you getting the output?
Yes.
Alexandra,
Yes, ma'am.
Chad,
Yes, I am.
Kristen,
Yes.
David, David,
Sorry, no,
are you getting the output?
no.
What are you
It's
getting?
okay. It's okay. It really is okay.
Dominic, you got it, yeah. Julian,
Yeah, I got it.
Karen, Karen. Oh, you are.
Ma'am, not yet.
Sorry, sorry. I was Lillian.
Yes, I got it.
Okay, and both Lillian without E and with E.
Yes.
You're talking to me. Oh, yeah, never mind.
Okay, Michael,
Yes.
Ngok,
Yes.
Nicholas,
Yes.
and Rahi Unnala.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, awesome. So I'll show you what exactly this output, what exactly does that even mean. So there is ASCII code associated with a character. So the reason as I mentioned, characters are single letters, like single letters, which could be A, B, C, D. It could be also brackets. It could be plus, minus. But there is a character as well as there is an ASCII code associated with that specific character. So if you see over here, 65 is a decimal or ASCII code for the character, which is A. And you can search on internet ASCII table and you can see what are the characters associated. So if you process any input which is in the form of character, it will consider it as an ASCII value. So even though when you are creating the variable in this case as 9, the ASCII code for 9 is 57. So on your memory, in your memory, what will happen is, so once again, I do not want to complicate the stuff, but you should like remember, if you are processing characters, these are processed in the form of like ASCII values. So when I say char C is equals to lowercase a, in your memory, what will happen? It will create a variable which is C, which will store only the character value, which is in the form of the character, which in this case is A, and the ASCII value would be stored. So ASCII value of lowercase a is 97. So in your, this happens only with your character. And then when you print C, then in that case, it will print the character associated with that ASCII value. So when you assigned the value of A or any variable as 65, and since you have put that as a character, What you are telling to the compiler is create a character A which will store the value as 65. And now when you are printing the value, it will check what is the ASCII code for 65. It will look at the ASCII table and it will print that specific value, which in this case was your 65 was your A. Does that make sense? Why are we getting that A output?
Yeah, that makes more sense actually when you break it down.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, character is the only one which is processed in this specific manner. Since character is always having an ASCII value, and when you are creating a variable character, it will always store the ASCII code associated with that specific character. And even if when you assign a number, it will consider that this as an ASCII code and it will produce an output. So let's pick some other number. So if you see this character, these are stored till 127. Let me change it to 128. And let's see what would be the output. Or let's say 130. And let me print this. So first let me print this with this and run it. Right now it gives me 9 and 8. And this time let me give 130. It gives me only 9. It doesn't produces an output for 130 because there is no ASCII character associated. But if I make it as 127, it will print a question mark, which in this case is a delete value. So because it cannot print, it's a character associated with a delete one. So remember, when you want to process any character values, there should be a specific range, and the range should be in terms of these characters, which is 65 till 122. Once again, characters are processed in ASCII values. Okay. So let's see, go back over here. So we did talk about integer, double. There's also one more, which is Boolean. So Boolean values process the information in the form of zeros and ones. So let's come over here and let's say bool. Bool is the variable which is used. I think Boolean. Boolean is the variable which is used to create a Boolean value, which is in the form of true or false, or in other ways, zeros and one. And you can create a value, value which is considered as either true or false. So I can create Boolean will process and has only two possible values, which is in the form of true or false. So Boolean flag true is false. So there are two Boolean values that you are creating, which would only and only take value true or false. I cannot say false one. Because false one is not a keyword associated with Boolean. Boolean will only and only process true and false, true and false. That's it. If I make it as F as capital, it will give me an error. Once again, it is case sensitive. False would be in lowercase. True is also in lowercase. Now let's print the value of flag. When I run this, you will see the value is printed as true. Can anyone tell me what is the use case of including these Boolean values, which is in the form of true or false?
Oh, you said what's the use of them?
Yeah.
Is it in conditional statements, like
Yes.
if this
Ye-
is true?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so the use case of using these variable is generally in the conditional statement. And let's suppose you are creating an application where you are interested only some people to access your application. Let's suppose Dominic wants to give access only to me and Lillian and maybe Julian and Karen. Only three people would be given access. So what Dominic can write a code is that if the character or the string is Hina, they can be given access. So make it true. If if the string value is Julian, then in that case, give it true, which means they can access. Similarly, if it is Karen, then just make it true. But for any other else, make it false, which means they cannot access their system at all. So you can create your application, and that is the use case of these Boolean variables, which is true and false, which are used for providing an accessibility in your application that you are writing, or for creating different kind of conditions. And when the condition is true or false, you do that. Besides, so we did cover multiple of the variables. I believe it was integer. We covered double, float. What else did we cover? String. Am I missing anything else?
I don't think so. I don't think you're missing any.
One more thing I covered. Whoever tells me, I would see that that person was totally attentive. Let's see. Cat is there, but one more.
Oh, you covered number, I think.
Which one?
Number?
No,
Character?
no. Boolean is also there. Anything which is on the screen. But what else? One more. I'll give extra credit to the one who will predict that if they remember it. Yeah.
Is it voidness?
No. It starts with an L.
Oh, is it long?
Yes, long. Who spoke? Long. Who was the one who was saying? Besides Nicholas and Karen. Okay, so long is another one. Long was another integer one which considers 2 to the power of minus, I said 2 to the power of 63 to 2 to the power of minus 2 to the power of 63. That is another integer variable which will consider like more values. There is also byte. So if you understand, so integer takes 2 to the power of 32 to negative 2 to the power of 32. There is byte. Byte is another variable. So byte variable will contain, for instance, let's make it as range and make it the value as 124. This will always and always have the numbers between minus 128 to 127. So all the values which is inside this, you can put this. Like if you want to specify a range, let's suppose you are creating an application for 127 students in your class. So for instance, we have 127 students in the class. So I can just write a small function that if the number is within this range, byte range, which is minus 128 to 127, just process it and next you neglect it. It doesn't mean that you cannot create an integer value, which would be range of integer as not 124. You can do it. You can totally do it. Do not get confused that for any values which is between minus 128 to 127, only those could be picked in, could be written in byte. No, it can be also put in integer. So the way it is processing your values is something like this. So you have your byte. Byte contains in the range of negative 128 to 127. Then you will have your integer. Integer will contain all the values, which is 2 to the power of 32 to negative 2 to the power of 32. On the top of it is your long value, which will consider all the other values. So what I'm saying is that even though if you are creating an integer value, it can always pick any values within, which is within the byte range. If you're picking any long value, it can always pick any value in the integer values. So it's not mandatory that all the values which is within this range should be byte. No, it can be an integer, it can be long. It is just like group by group. You are just assigning certain specific range of values that could be considered in that specific range itself. Yes, so byte is generally, it uses an 8-bit values, 8-bit values, and it is generally, there is a concept of the signed and unsigned integer, which we can cover in the later classes. But this byte is an 8-bit signed 2's complement integer value, which is included. Have you guys heard about 1's complement, 2's complement?
I have.
Yeah.
Kind of.
No? Okay. So these are some, like every system has a different kind of way of processing the bit values. Some process in the form of signed values and some process in the unsigned value. And they have certain specific ways that you can process these signed or unsigned numbers in the form of 1's complement and 2's complement. But once again, we are not going deep into it, but you should understand right now there is also byte variable which is used, which has a specific range. There is also short type, and that is for 16-bit. And so in between your byte and integer, there is short. So you have byte. Above this, you have your short. Above this, you have your integer. So this contains 8-bit, this is 16-bit, this is 32-bit. Integer is 32, and then long has 64-bit. So that's the specific range of values for each one of them. So if you want to create a short variable, you can write short. Once again, it will contain very specific range, which is a 16-bit. So let's say short range is equals to minus 200. Once again, it can process both positive and negative value, and which in the range of 16-bit. So this is 16-bit signed. This is 8-bit signed. Then you have your integer. Sorry, integer was 32-bit. Byte was 8-bit. Okay, and Boolean takes just these values. So we have variety of things that we covered today. So we covered several data types today, which are listed in the in your slide deck. But primarily, the ones that we would be using would be integer, double, character, Boolean, and string. These would be the primary one. But as I mentioned, I gave you the description of many others, which I did include, which was byte, which was short, which was long, which was double, which was character, Boolean, string, and many others. So you can use these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Total 8 data types are there. Total 8 ones. But we would be primarily revolving our code and also float. Sorry, float is another one. I forgot float. Integer, double, character, Boolean, string, float, long, short, and byte. There are these specific data types that you can use. These are some of the examples which we covered in the class, where your integer values take it, the value between 2 to the power of 32 to negative 2 to the power of 32. You can always put positive and negative numbers over here. floating point will always have an F in the end. Character will be always included in a single quote. Boolean would be having true or false. String values would be having double quotes. Always remember that. Okay. So I believe I can, and all this is given over here in this as well. So byte has the way it will take is, as Dominic mentioned, it is an 8-bit. 8-bit can be considered as 1 byte. So every time you store your byte value, 1 byte of memory would be allocated for that variable that you have created. Generally, people pick very small data types so that their memory is not like it takes so much space. And that is the reason people have come up with these data types so that we know which numbers would be stored and which like how much memory it will be stored. So for short, for instance, it is 2 bytes, which has the range of 16-bit, which is negative 32,000 to positive this. 16 bits, that is the reason it is taking 2 bytes. Next one is 32 bits, so it is taking 4 bytes. Long takes 8 bytes because it processes 64 bits. Float takes also 4 bytes. Double takes 8 bytes. Boolean take 1 bit, which is true or false. Character takes 2 bytes, which is storing the ASCII value associated with that specific character. And we did cover about the ASCII character as well. So I think I can stop today, and you can stay in the call for like 10-15 minutes. But just to remind you that your assignment, 3 assignments are due Friday, and we will be meeting next Monday. Let me tell you what are the assignments once again. So you're under modules, under module 1, there are M1 exercise, which contains 2 programs that you have to write, plus what did you learn by writing these program. So write a brief description of what you learned, and exercise 1718 in your book, which is your chapter number 1. All the things which I have covered in the class would be easily, you can do the first quiz, M1 quiz. There are 2 slide decks which I have covered. This one I'm still covering. This one we have covered. And I have recorded this particular lecture as well. If you have any questions, you can always look at this recording. But by Friday, you have to complete all the 2 assignments. 1 assignment has 2 program as well as 1 write-up and 1 quiz. That is all due by Friday. Okay, but any questions?
What are the readings that we could be doing on this week? I remember last time you said we can do chapter 1. Do we do chapter 2, 3, or what?
Just chapter 1. For doing the quiz as well as this exercise, just chapter 1.
Okay, thank you.